Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how I painted Aldrac, one of the warlords of Carn Dûm, leading the men into battle against Arnor. I was asked to paint this guy by one of the followers on the channel and I'm going to show you how I did it. So here he is, all primed and ready to go. Before I primed it, I based the model with some modeling sand. You can use whatever you prefer, of course. But I find it more easy to do it up front than afterwards. So I spray painted everything with a light gray color because the miniature is a lot of skin and I like to start with a bright undertone. For the skin itself, I'm using Night Questor flesh. There is quite some skin to cover, the arms, the hands, some part of the face, his entire chest of course. And once this is dry, I first started by adding the eyes. Because they are in the inside of this helmet, it's hard to reach and easy to make a mistake, and it's a shame to do it when the skin is completely finished. So better to be safe than sorry. I added a pupil with some Abaddon black. And once I was satisfied, I continued with the rest of the skin. I made a wash out of Volupus pink, but you can use Carbro crimson as well if you want. This tends to be a bit more pink. After that, I mixed some Kislev flesh to the Night Questor flesh, just a tiny bit, and covered most of the large surfaces. And made sure that there are some definition of muscle in there. There's quite large areas that we're covering here, leaving some of the undertone shining through. And after this, I keep adding Kislev flesh to the mix to brighten it up. So I'm building it up in layers. And keep decreasing the area I cover. And keep increasing the palette wedge flesh, so that you get a brighter and brighter undertone. If you think those differences are too big, you can kind of blend the colors together by making a wash, like I'm doing here, over the darker areas. So you kind of pull those colors together. Next highlight, I added some palette wedge flesh to the Kislev flesh and added some extreme highlights here and there. Now with this final mixes, we're working towards the extreme details. So just pick out tiny spots and be as compact as possible. So the knuckles on the fingers, some muscles on his chest, on his arms, etc. Next, I'm adding an extreme highlight of pure palette wedge flesh on the knuckles of the fingers, for example, and the tip of the nose. I'm now using Mechanicus Standard Grey on the furry part of the cloak. And also his beard. There is a tiny piece of beard showing. I'm highlighting the beard with Dawnstone. It's quite hard to reach as most of it is behind his arm. Next highlight, I'm using Administratum Grey. And I'm washing the entire beard with a thinned down version of Null to get some extra definition in there. The cloak, the shoulder pads and all the leather parts I base coated with Abaddon black and dried bark. There is a lot of area to cover here. Don't forget the straps. And the end result should be something like this. I also painted the handle of his weapon with the same color. Next up is his pants, and I painted that with Corvus Black. Corvus Black is actually a very dark grey, but it looks like a matte black, and I love this color for pants or clothing because it's not shiny. Next base color we're going to use is Galvorbak Red for the straps around his arm, the weapon, and around the antlers on his helmet. For the boots I'm using Abaddon Black mixed with some Thondia Brown as a base color. And also the straps around the padding around his lower legs. The highlight stage for this one is pure Thondia Brown at first. Paint the tip of the shoes. You can gradually build it up by increasing Thondia Brown until you reach pure Thondia Brown. You get a nice flow. Also do that on the straps. For the padding I'm using Apothecary White over my base color of Grey Seer. It gives a beautiful result. For the metal parts I'm using Leadbelcher. There are some metal spikes all around his body, his arms, his chest, his waist, his back. And the inside of the shield I painted with snakebite leather. Just to have it more bright than the rest of his browns. I kind of love this color. Next we're highlighting the leather parts. First, pure dried bark. Leave those deeper parts nice and dark, so kind of paint around it. So the darkest part would be where the stitches on his armor are. So you first highlight everything else, and then we're going to take it a step further by adding some Mournfang Brown to the dried bark. It gives it a kind of yellowy look, which looks like a bit of worn leather. So we're getting there. Again here, focus on smaller areas than you did before, so you get a nice transition from dark to bright. You just pick out the edges here, and some tiny parts in the middle. You can add some scratches if you want. And also don't forget to do the same details on the cloak. And then we're going to do some final highlights with pure Mournfang Brown. Like I said, some scratches here and there, but now only focus on the very edges, the corners, the parts that would reflect the most light or would be the most worn in case of leather. Next, with the rock-art flesh, I'm painting those tiny stitches on his chest and side armor. And I love these tiny details, they really define the model. Then with some Baneblade Brown I added some extra shine to the top of the leather, just to give it a little bit more extra color. You can also use it to do an extreme edge highlight, for example to the top of the armor, or the side of the straps. I also used this Baneblade Brown to add some wood grain effect to the wooden handle of his mace. I'm next highlighting the furry part of his cloak with Administratum Grey, and I used a large dry brush to do so. These parts are easiest to paint with a dry brush. You get a nice transition from dark to bright. And I took it one step further with some pure Grey Seer, also with a dry brush but focusing on the tips. Now it's easy to overdo this, so I always try to focus on the top part, very gently touching the lower parts, just to have some color difference between the dark and the bright. Then with some non-oil I'm washing the antlers on his helmet. I also used a Grey Seer base coat as a primer. And when adding this black it instantly creates this beautiful effect. And then as a highlight on the red straps I'm using Bugman's Glow. Try and focus on those edges. They're very thin and at some points I went too far, so I corrected it afterwards by re-adding some Galvorbag red. It's just these tiny details that makes the model look amazing. For the antlers I went back with Grey Sear, the base color I used before, and focused on the tips to make them look a little bit more sharp. Then I used some Liberator gold on the helmet. Just on the front there are some gold details, the edges of the helmet. There are some hard to reach places here as well. This is a beautiful model, but the way that it's posed sometimes adds a little problems to reach some of these areas. But hey, if it was easy, it wouldn't be a challenge, right? I highlighted the gold parts with some Canoptic alloy. So just gently touch some of the corners here and there, or edge highlight it if you want. And then with some Abaddon black and corn red, I painted the cloth hanging around his waist. It's a more deep red look. And the benefit of starting with Abaddon black in the mixture is that you can go over it with pure corn red as a first highlight, which really stays close together so it doesn't look too extreme. I covered most of the area with the corn red again, and left some of those shady parts as they were, nice and dark. And next I'm adding some Wild Rider red to the mix. I think I even ended with pure Wild Rider red, which was a little bit too bright for my taste, so I toned it down just a little bit by mixing it with the corn red before, and that was the perfect mix for me. Stormhost silver I used to paint the sharp edges on the mace, and what I did here is you paint from the inside towards the outside of a blade, if you know what I mean. So that way you can create some sharpness to it. I also used the same Stormhost silver on the very edges of the shield. You can use your brush sideways as kind of a dry brush technique to create some edge highlights here and there. And then it then took Mechanica Standard Grey as a highlight on the pants. And a tiny bit of Administratum Grey to the very extreme highlights. Then the base I painted with Mechanica Standard Grey on the rock he is standing on. That's part of the model, the rest I added myself. I'm gonna let that dry. And in the meanwhile I added Garagax Sewer to the base, which is a nice sand color. I love it, I use it a lot of times. I think it's one of my most used contrast paints, and I love the way this sand reacts to this. You get these nice dark and bright details. It looks like a forest sand look. I really like it. I shaded the rock with some Nuln Oil and added some sharpness to the rock by adding some Administratum Grey. Just pulling some scratches here and there, some sharpness to the edges. And if you want, you can take it a bit further with some Grey Sear. And here's the final result for Aldrac, Warlord of the Carn Dûm. I really enjoyed painting this guy, and I hope this video was of any help to you guys. If it was, please consider subscribing to the channel and leave a comment below. I love to hear from you. And if you're interested in this kind of content, I will be making a lot more in the future. So stay tuned. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!